Hey, this is Connor from Biker's Edge. Sorry for the delay. I went to Yellowstone with my family, but we are back in action. Today we're talking about the Orbea Rise H.
Chunky stuff here. Oh, giant rock! Sabotage!
The Rise H is by far the lightest bike in our entire test by probably a good 10 pounds. And that lighter weight becomes the defining characteristic of the Rise. It stands out from the rest of the pack in how it handles out on the trail. What it lacks in power, it makes up for in agility and maneuverability. So is it the right value e-bike for you? Stick around to find out. So the Rise H30 is a little more mild-mannered than some of the bikes we've just talked about. It rolls on 140 millimeters of travel front and rear, and it also has two 29-inch wheels. It falls a little more on the trail side of the spectrum than it does all mountain or enduro. It has a little bit steeper head tube angle at 66 degrees. The reach is a healthy 500 millimeters in the size extra large that we rode, and the wheelbase comes in at 1255 millimeters. Orbea has actually done a really good job of keeping the chainstays very reasonable for a full 29-inch e-bike. The chainstays are only 5 millimeters longer than the pedal version of this bike, the Orbea Occam, so 445 millimeters on the chainstays. The Rise's componentry all kind of match the geometry and the suspension in terms of application. It's a little bit lighter duty. You don't get the burliest fork, you don't get the burliest shock, you get recon tires, but all of that kind of contributes to the ride quality out on the trail. Let's talk about the drive system. The Rise uses the Shimano EP8 RS, which is just a throttled back version of the big full power EP8. Instead of giving you 85 Newton meters of peak torque, you only get 60. But that lower power output does give you a little bit better use of the battery. It also gives you a more natural ride feel. The RS version of this motor is a little bit less torquey and it prefers a higher cadence. So those looking to stick to the most pedal bike-like experience on their e-bike are really going to like the EP8 RS. The Rise H uses a full power 540 watt-hour battery, where the carbon version only uses a 360 watt-hour battery. It does add a little bit of weight, but it adds a ton of range. You've got to keep in mind that this motor is pulling less power from the battery. So that 540 watt-hour battery ends up being bigger than what you'd expect because most of the motors we're talking about are 80 to 85 Newton meters. I do think that this is probably one of the longest lasting e-bikes out there, definitely in our test. So let's jump into how this thing rides. So most of the bikes up to this point in our test have been very good climbers, and they each bring something unique to the table. The Reign is the king of traction. The Instinct offers a ton of power. The Rise brings a lot of maneuverability and agility to the trail. It also provides a very natural ride quality. I think a large part of what makes it such an excellent climber is that it's a hell of a lot lighter than all the other bikes in this test. I'm not a weight weenie, I don't really care about it, but 10 pounds is pretty noticeable. So the Rise's geometry is some of the steepest and most trail in our entire test. And that does make it probably the quickest handling and the most responsive climbing bike. Where the Reign brings some plowability to the trail where it can just go straight up and over everything because it's got the suspension to do that, the Rise prefers to maybe zig and zag a little bit more and kind of pick its way through rougher bits of trail. While the Reign's plowability is really nice for open, fast, straight bits of climbing, the Rise does quite a bit better job in tighter, more technical, twistier, windier bits of climbs. The Rise's suspension feels quite a bit firmer and more supportive than the others under pedaling forces. And that does lead to better efficiency, but it comes at the cost of traction, especially when you combine that with a recon rear tire. I did notice a little bit of a lack of traction on steeper, looser bits of the trail. The smoother, more natural EP8 RS does do a pretty good job of mitigating that kind of like burnout or that torquey acceleration where you break free, because it is so natural. But I would still love to see a little bit grippier rear tire on the Rise for better climbing traction. And for those of you wondering, the EP8 RS does offer plenty of power to hang with bigger, faster e-bikes, especially when the trail is tighter, more technical, and not just wide open like a steep fire road. In those situations, the big bikes will start to pull away from the Rise a little bit, but on most single track, especially technical single track, the Rise is more than enough to hang with the bigger e-bikes. So overall, the Rise is an excellent climber, offering a lot of control over the bike, offering a lot of maneuverability and agility, and a very natural feeling ride experience. So on the downhills, the Rise continues to beat all of the other bikes in the maneuverability department. They just simply cannot hang with the Rise's ability to unweight, to change lines, to get airborne. They just can't do it. It makes the Rise the ultimate bike for the active rider, someone who just isn't content to hang onto the bike in passenger mode. The Rise's geometry puts it in a very quick, nimble, and agile handling category for me. I've recently started thinking that e-bikes tend to ride like they have 10 to 20 millimeters more travel than their pedal bike counterparts. The Rise is the one bike that pokes a hole in that theory for me though. It rides like the 140 millimeter trail bike that it is. It certainly doesn't feel like it's got 150 or 160 millimeters of rear travel. It has the quickest handling and the most active and lively feel to it out of all the bikes in our test. It's not the bike for dropping your heels and just plowing through all the chatter. It's happier to zig and zag or to pop up and over roots and rocks or to unweight over technical features. So if you're the type of rider that is a very active and engaged rider, you'll fit right in with the Rise. The suspension platform on the Rise is far more firm and supportive than it is plush and gooey. I wouldn't call it harsh or chattery, but it is on the firm side. It doesn't ride like most e-bikes where they just feel extra plush and really soft off the top. I think a lot of that comes to do with the sprung to unsprung ratio, and the Rise just isn't as heavy as those big bikes. So the suspension feels a lot more like a pedal bike than it does a big gooey e-bike. The firm suspension platform lends itself to bunny hopping, unweighting, jumping, cornering, and it makes the bike a lot of fun to ride. And if done correctly, you can actually generate a ton of speed out on the trail because the suspension isn't robbing all of the effort that you put in. I will say, however, it does tend to skip around when things start getting really rough and fast. I would argue that other bikes are going to be a better option for you if that's what you want to do. So if you've been hesitant to try an e-bike because you've heard they're big and bulky and cumbersome and hard to ride, I would suggest giving the Rise a try, because for me it rides a lot more like a pedal bike than it does a standard e-bike. And don't write it off if you're an e-bike lover. I love e-bikes and I've ridden a ton of them, and I still really love riding the Rise for the fun, lively quality that it brings. So overall on the descents, I really like the Rise for its lively ride quality. It's just something that bigger, heavier e-bikes can't offer. It's a well-rounded bike that's going to be a lot of fun to ride in a very wide variety of terrain. Just don't plan on plowing through World Cup rock gardens at a really high speed. So now let's talk about the value score. The Rise H30 offers a ton of bang for your buck. It was really hard for me to decide between this or the Rain E for that top spot. I think the Rain E just barely edges out the Rise H30, if only for the fact that it's $200 cheaper with a very similar value in the componentry that you get. None of the components on the Rise are blingy or expensive or top of the line, but they are all good enough, and they are durable and reliable and will last for a very long time. However, I have one complaint about the component spec. As a rule, I do not think e-bikes should come with 2-piston brakes, and the Rise comes with 2-piston brakes. You're just carrying more speed, your bike is heavier, you're going faster. E-bikes should come with 4-piston brakes. So who is the Rise H30 for? I see the Rise as a really good bike for 3 different rider groups. The first is that new to e-bikes rider. Someone who's maybe hesitant to try riding an e-bike. They don't want a big, bulky, cumbersome, heavy bike. That Rise is probably going to be that gateway bike into e-bikes for you. It opens up a lot of terrain, a lot of difficult, long, nasty climbs that you just wouldn't want to ride otherwise. It opens up all of that terrain while still offering as close to a pedal bike experience as possible. The other group I think the Rise is a good fit for will be the people who sometimes ride with e-bikers or sometimes ride with pedal bikers. It has enough power to hang with most of the e-bikes, but it's not so powerful that you're just going to be killing all of your pedal bike friends the entire time. It really bridges that gap, and it can go either way. Say you got some really fast kids, put your bike in eco or trail and you will hang with them just fine. Or say you're riding with big full power e-bike people, put it in boost and give it a little more juice yourself and you'll hang just fine. And the last group that I think will enjoy the Rise are the people who are very active riders. Even if you're not a new to e-bikes rider like myself, I've ridden a lot of them. I love riding e-bikes. I still really enjoy riding the Rise. It's not just the gateway e-bike. It is a very good option for an active rider. Someone who likes to jump, someone who likes to bunny hop, unweight, change lines, and make the most of the trail. Those types of riders are going to fit in great with the Rise. So, one line bike review just to wrap up the Rise. It is the most acoustic feeling electric bike. Thanks for sticking around. We'll see you next time.